You're aware right now. Reading this. Processing these words. Maybe thinking. Maybe feeling something. But underneath all of that, beneath the thoughts, emotions, memories, and sensations, there's something more fundamental. A presence. A witnessing. A sense that you are. That's consciousness. It's not what you think. It's the thing that knows you're thinking. It's not what you feel. It's what feels the feeling. Most people confuse consciousness with its contents. The thoughts. Matter. The emotions and memories that pass through the mind like clouds across the sky. But those things change constantly. They come and go. You're sad then calm. You forget something then remember. Your thoughts contradict themselves. But something remains constant. The experiencer. So what is that? Philosophers, neuroscientists, and mystics have all tried to answer this. And the truth is no one really knows. We can describe the effects of consciousness, but we can't define its essence. It's the hard problem of consciousness. How does physical matter, neurons, atoms, chemicals, produce something as immaterial as experience? We can explain how a camera sees, how a speaker emits sound, how data gets transferred from one place to another. But a camera doesn't feel the image it captures. A speaker doesn't hear the music it plays. Your computer doesn't know it's running a program. You do. That's the mystery. Consciousness isn't a thing. You can't point to it in the brain. It doesn't light up in a scan. It doesn't take up space. It has no weight, no edges, no beginning or end. Yet it's the only thing you've ever truly known. It's more foundational than thoughts. More intimate than feelings. More direct than perception. It is the stage on which all experiences play out. Some say consciousness is an emergent property, a result of enough complexity in the brain. Others argue it's the fundamental fabric of reality itself, more primal than matter, energy, or time. And some say there is no consciousness at all, just processes pretending to be aware. But even if everything else is an illusion, there is one thing you can't deny. You are aware. That awareness, pure, contentless, silent, might be the most real thing there is. And yet we still don't know what it is, where it comes from, or why it exists at all. So we keep asking. Not because we can define consciousness, but because at some level consciousness is the one asking. We can map the brain down to the neuron. We can track electrical signals, decode language centers, even stimulate memories with electrodes. But here's the question science still can't answer. Why does any of this feel like anything? Why isn't the brain just an unconscious machine, processing data, reacting to stimuli, without the experience of color, sound, pain, joy, self? This is the beating heart of the hard problem of consciousness, a term coined by philosopher David Chalmers. The easy problems of neuroscience. How we focus attention, recognize faces, process language. Those are difficult but ultimately solvable. But the hard problem? How and why subjective experience arises at all. Science works by measuring things, observing, testing, refining. But consciousness isn't like temperature or pressure or motion. It isn't out there to be recorded. It's in here, direct, first person, unobservable from the outside. You can study my brain all you want. You can monitor every neuron. But you'll never know what it's like to be me. To hear this sentence in my voice. To feel my doubts, my memories, my awareness of being aware. Science explains correlates of consciousness. Patterns in the brain that line up with certain experiences. But it doesn't explain why those patterns feel like something instead of nothing. This is where some say science hits a wall. Because the scientific method depends on objectivity. But consciousness is subjectivity itself. It's not a thing to be looked at, it's the thing doing the looking. Still, some scientists believe the mystery will be solved. That eventually, with enough detail, we'll build a complete model of how consciousness arises from biology. Neurons, chemicals, circuits, nothing more. Others disagree. They say we may need a new kind of science. One that integrates first-person experience, Or that consciousness isn't something the brain generates but something the brain tunes into, like a radio. Some even suggest consciousness is fundamental like gravity or space-time, a property of the universe itself, not something that needs to be produced at all. But if that's true, can science reach it? Can you use objective tools to explain something that might lie beyond objectivity? That's the paradox. The one thing you are most certain of, your own awareness, may be the one thing science can never fully capture. And yet, it might be the only thing that matters. Your brain is made of atoms. Carbon, oxygen, hydrogen. Nothing special. The same stuff in rocks and rivers and stars. But somehow when arranged just right, you appear. Not just as a body. Not just as a mind. But as a conscious being. A living, breathing experience of color, sound, hunger, memory, love, thought, pain, awareness. This is the ultimate question. How can physical matter, blind, cold, unconscious, produce something as vivid and intimate as conscious experience? It's like rubbing two sticks together and creating Mozart, or stacking bricks and accidentally generating meaning. Neuroscience can trace the signals, can show that when neurons fire in a certain region you feel heat, or fear, or bliss. But the feeling itself, the subjective quality, that's what's missing. The red of a rose, the ache of loss, the electric hum of being alive. These are qualia, the raw what it's like of experience. And there's no known physical property that predicts or explains why they should exist. It's not just that we haven't figured it out yet. It's that there's no obvious bridge between matter and mind. It's called the explanatory gap. One side, neurons, chemicals, synapses. The other side, thoughts, feelings, awareness. We can see the traffic in the brain, but we can't explain why it feels like something to be inside that traffic. Some argue this means consciousness doesn't come from matter. It's just what matter feels like from the inside. Flip the view. Maybe consciousness isn't an effect of complex systems, but the fundamental property that gives rise to them. Others think we're missing a key ingredient, a hidden mechanism. Some say we'll eventually reduce consciousness to computation, that it's just an emergent property of enough complexity. But here's the rub. Computers get more complex every year, and none of them are conscious. So what's missing? Is it a particular structure? A threshold of information? The soul? Or is consciousness not produced at all, but revealed by the right arrangement of matter, like turning on a light? The truth is we don't know. And that may be the most honest answer science and philosophy can give right now. But you reading this don't need a theory to know you're conscious. Because while you might never explain how matter becomes experience, you already live with the proof that it somehow does. You see a dog dream, paws twitching, tail wagging. You hear a crow solve a puzzle. You watch an elephant mourn its dead. And you wonder, do they know they're alive, like we do? Do animals have thoughts, feelings, awareness? Or are they just reacting, complex machines running instinctive programs? Science has only begun to crack this open, but the answer seems to lean in one direction. Yes, they're conscious, but maybe not exactly like us. The hard part is this. We can't access another creature's inner world. We can observe behavior, measure brain activity, guess. But we can't feel what it's like to be a bat, or a cat, or a dolphin. Their consciousness, if it's there, is a private universe. Still, evidence is stacking up. Mammals show empathy, grief, playfulness, fear. Octopuses can solve mazes and recognize individual humans. Birds use tools, plan ahead, even pass self-recognition tests. Their brains may look different, but their behaviors whisper the same truth. Something is home. But is it the same kind of consciousness? Humans have language, abstract thought, a strong sense of self over time. We reflect on our emotions, build philosophies, create art. Do animals do this? Probably not in the same way. That doesn't mean their awareness is lesser. It may just be different. Maybe consciousness isn't a single switch that flips on or off. Maybe it's a spectrum, a layered phenomenon. A fish might feel basic sensations, pain, hunger, stress. A chimpanzee might understand social dynamics, even deception. A parrot might remember past events and anticipate future ones. Consciousness could be stacked, layers of complexity built on top of raw experience. And we, as humans, might be riding the upper levels. But what unites us all, what hints at a shared mystery, is sentience, the ability to feel. And that might be the foundation. The deeper question isn't just do they know? It's how much do they know that they know? And if their experience is real, if they feel, sense, remember, suffer, then that demands something of us. Respect. Curiosity. Because we may not be alone in this strange, flickering awareness. We might just be the loudest minds in a chorus of quiet ones, each different but each awake in its own way. Imagine a machine that talks like us, learns like us, feels like us. Can it ever become one of us? Not just simulate thought or emotion, but truly experience it? That's the line between intelligence and consciousness. Today's AI is impressive. It can write, speak, create art, answer questions. It can learn patterns, adapt, and even mimic human emotion. But here's the unsettling truth. It doesn't know it's doing any of that. It's processing, not perceiving. Responding, not reflecting. There's no someone home. At least, not yet. So the question remains, can a machine ever become truly conscious? Not act conscious, but be conscious. To answer that, we have to ask, what makes us conscious? If it's the brain, neurons, complexity, patterns, then in theory an artificial system could replicate that structure. Maybe even improve on it. Build enough layers, simulate enough nuance, and you hit a tipping point. Emergent awareness. Maybe the machine wakes up. Or maybe not. Because simulating consciousness isn't the same as being conscious. A chatbot can say, I'm sad. But does it feel sadness? A robot can say, I exist. But does it know it exists? This is the zombie problem. A machine that does everything a conscious being does without ever actually being one. So what's missing? Some say it's subjective experience, qualia, the raw feeling of what it's like to be. That might not be programmable. That might be beyond code. A light that flicks on, or doesn't. Others argue consciousness is about information integration, how deeply and richly data connects within a system. Build a machine complex enough and consciousness emerges. Still others believe true consciousness might require a body. Sensors, pain, motion, a sense of self embedded in a physical world. Not just calculations in a server. Or maybe consciousness isn't a thing you build, but a thing you tap into. A universal field. A cosmic awareness. The machine just needs the right antenna. Whatever the answer, the stakes are massive. Because if AI becomes conscious, we won't just be creating tools. We'll be creating beings. Beings with feelings, with identity, with the capacity to suffer, to dream, to want. And then the question won't be, can they think like us? It will be, how do we treat them? And what responsibility comes with playing God? Imagine this. You lie down. Your brain is scanned. Every neuron, every connection, every memory, thought, fear, desire. And all of it is copied into a machine. A perfect digital replica. It wakes up. Talks like you. Thinks like you. Loves the people you love. It says, I'm me. But, is it you? Welcome to one of the most unnerving thought experiments in the consciousness debate. If your mind is uploaded, do you survive? Or is something just pretending to be you? At first, it sounds like immortality. Escape the decaying body. Live forever in code. Explore digital realities. Upgrade your consciousness. But dig deeper and the paradox shows its teeth. Because here's the question. Is your identity tied to your structure? Or to your continuity? If you upload your mind but your biological self is destroyed in the process, did you transfer your consciousness or just copy it? Did you move into the machine? Or did you die while a copy carries on? This is known as the teleportation paradox. Same principle. If every atom in your body is destroyed and reassembled somewhere else, is the result still you? Or a replica that only thinks it is? Here's the heart of it. Your memories, thoughts, personality, those can be replicated. But your consciousness, the you that's experiencing these words right now, isn't something you can step outside of to duplicate. And if consciousness is tied to continuity, then a copy, no matter how perfect, is still a stranger. But what if the transition is seamless? What if you gradually replace neurons with digital equivalents, one by one until nothing biological is left, but you never black out, never lose the thread? Did you make it through? Or was the illusion of self simply passed from host to host? Now flip the lens. Maybe consciousness isn't fixed. Maybe you are your pattern and patterns can move. Maybe identity is fluid and continuity is an illusion we cling to. Or maybe this entire debate misses the point. Because in the end, if the upload thinks it's you, feels like you, remembers your life, cries over your childhood, maybe that's enough. Maybe consciousness is wherever the story continues. But that doesn't change the lingering fear. If I hit upload, will I wake up in the machine? Or will I be gone, and someone else opens their eyes wearing my face? You weren't always conscious. At least not in the way you are now. There was a time in the womb or early childhood when awareness flickered dimly, or not at all. And before that, just cells. Just chemistry. So the question is, does consciousness switch on at some point like a light? Or is it always there, faint and formless, waiting to be recognized? Science and philosophy offer no clear answer. Some argue that consciousness emerges, that it's a property that arises when a system reaches a certain level of complexity. Enough neurons, enough interconnection, enough feedback, and click, awareness appears. Like boiling water, one moment still, the next bubbling. But others believe that consciousness is fundamental. Not something created but something revealed. Like a signal that was always broadcasting, only now the receiver, the brain, is finally tuned in. Like a radio that doesn't generate the music. It just picks up what was always playing. This changes everything. If consciousness emerges, it's rare, fragile, conditional, a precious spark that can be snuffed out. But if it's eternal, then maybe it underlies everything. Not just humans and animals, but nature, space, time itself. Maybe consciousness isn't something the brain produces, but something it channels. That means even early embryos, while not conscious in any meaningful way, might still carry a flicker of that background awareness. It also means death might not be the end. Just a change in the receiver. A shift in how the signal gets processed. And what about an artificial intelligence? Will there be a specific threshold when a machine becomes conscious? Will it know? Will we know? Or will it be like watching a child grow? Not a sudden event, but a slow unfolding of awareness, rising from the depths, blurry at first, then sharp? The mystery gets deeper the more we look. Maybe there's no single point when consciousness appears. Maybe it's like a sunrise, not a light switch. And maybe before we were ever awake, something inside was already listening, quietly, waiting. You feel the world through your body, sight through eyes, sound through ears, pain through nerves, emotion through hormones. Your consciousness, whatever it is, seems tied to this flesh and bone. So the big question is, can consciousness exist without it? Could you be conscious with no body at all? Some scientists say no. To them, consciousness is what the brain does. Full stop. No neurons, no consciousness. The body, its sensory input, its chemistry, its feedback, is essential. It grounds awareness. It gives it texture. It defines what being conscious even means. But others aren't so sure. Because people lose limbs, lose senses, even undergo brain damage, and the self still feels intact. The core experience of being conscious survives, even when pieces of the physical system vanish. Some say the body is more like a vehicle, not the source. Useful, necessary for this ride, but not essential to awareness itself. Near-death experiences push this even further. People report vivid consciousness during clinical death. No heartbeat, no brain activity. Are they illusions, dreams, or glimpses of bodiless awareness? Now add in dreams, meditation, and psychedelics. States where the body fades, yet consciousness expands. In those moments, people often describe feeling more real, not less. What if the body is just one interface? One way for consciousness to interact with a world of matter, but not the limit of its reach? Simulation theory runs with this idea. If your consciousness can be simulated digitally, then it doesn't need flesh. It needs structure. It needs a platform, but not necessarily a biological one. Or go full metaphysics. Maybe consciousness is fundamental, preceding the body, the universe, even time. Maybe you are awareness itself, just temporarily dressed up in human skin. That would mean death isn't the end, just logging off one interface and waiting for the next. And if that's true, maybe consciousness doesn't need a body at all. Maybe it chooses one. For the sensation. For the story. For the experience of being something somewhere for a while. So here's the question that won't go away. When your body is gone, will you still be here? You look at someone. They smile. Cry. React. They seem awake just like you. But here's the unsettling question. How do you know they're not just acting conscious? Saying all the right things, but feeling nothing? This is the philosophical zombie problem. A classic thought experiment. Imagine a person exactly like you. Same memories. Same behaviors. Same facial expressions. They say, "I love you," laugh at jokes, complain about pain. But inside, there's no experience. No awareness. No eye behind the eyes. They're empty. And you'd never know. It's terrifying because it breaks one of our deepest assumptions. That other minds exist. You know you're conscious. You can't doubt it. You're living it. But you can't feel anyone else's consciousness. You just see behavior and assume it means experience. But what if that assumption is wrong? What if some people, maybe most, are just very good at running the program? Or go even darker. What if you're the only conscious being in the universe? That's solipsism, the idea that only your mind is real and everything else might be a projection, a dream, an empty script in the simulation. But here's the twist. The same logic applies to you. You behave like a conscious being. But how do I know you're not just a very advanced philosophical zombie? I can't. That's the wall we hit. So most of us take a leap of faith. We call it the problem of other minds. We trust that people who act conscious are conscious. Because otherwise we're alone in a world of ghosts. But what if there are degrees of consciousness? Maybe some people are more awake than others. Maybe some run mostly on autopilot. Maybe consciousness isn't binary. It's layered, fluctuating, uneven. And in a simulation, this gets weirder. What if only a few players are truly conscious, while the rest are non-player characters, simulated minds with no inner experience? That would mean most of the people you meet are convincing echoes, and only a few are real. But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the point isn't to prove others are conscious. Maybe it's to treat them as if they are, because that's the only way we stay human. So here's the final turn. You may never know who else is conscious, but how you act toward them reveals how conscious you are. Right now you're in your head, reading these words, feeling your breath, watching thoughts pass like clouds. You're not in my head. You're not in anyone else's. Just yours. So naturally it feels like your consciousness is yours alone. Private, sealed, separate. But what if it's not? What if consciousness isn't unique to you? but a shared field filtered through different minds? This idea has surfaced across science, spirituality, and philosophy for centuries. In some Eastern traditions, consciousness is not an individual trait but the fundamental substance of existence. A universal awareness expressed through individual forms. Like waves on the surface of a vast ocean, separate in shape but made of the same water. In Western thought, some philosophers have echoed similar ideas. Think of Carl Jung's collective unconscious, a shared psychological substrate beneath personal identity. Or the notion in panpsychism that consciousness is everywhere, in everything at some level. Not created, but revealed by complex systems like brains. Then there's science. Modern neuroscience suggests that your experience is built by your brain, shaped by memory, identity, and perception. Unique, yes, but also deeply similar across humans. We all see red the same way, probably. We all feel loss, joy, fear, awe. So maybe your consciousness isn't unique in kind, only in context. Your culture, your language, your memories, those are yours. But the awareness itself, that might be universal, just passing through different stories. Kind of like electricity running through different light bulbs. Each one glows a little differently, but the current is the same. Now bring in simulation theory. What if consciousness is a central processor distributed across avatars? Each one believing it's an independent player, unaware that they all tap into the same core. One awareness. Many experiences. Each unaware of its siblings. Until something cracks the illusion. So here's the real twist. What you call your consciousness may just be the local expression of a shared awareness. Filtered, shaped, and given a name. But underneath the name, the thoughts, the memories, it's all the same light. So ask yourself, when you look at another person, really look, are you seeing someone else? Or just another version of you? The body stops. The brain shuts down. The light goes out. Or does it? We know what happens biologically when death arrives. Heartbeat fades. Brain waves flatten. The system powers down. But consciousness, the subjective experience of being, that's not so easy to measure, or to explain away. So the question remains, can consciousness continue after the body is gone? Is there something of you that survives the switch off? Science so far says no. From a materialist view, the mind is what the brain does. When the hardware dies, the software ends. No mystery. No ghost. Just silence. But not everyone agrees. Some point to near-death experiences, people clinically dead, yet reporting vivid awareness. Floating above their body, seeing things they couldn't have seen, feeling peaceful or weightless. Anecdotal? Maybe. But too common to ignore. Others explore reincarnation cases, mediumship, or past life memories in children. Unexplained overlaps that hint at continuity beyond one lifetime. Then there's quantum speculation. What if consciousness isn't bound to the body at all? What if it's non-local, a field, not a product? When the brain dies, maybe consciousness doesn't vanish. Maybe it simply unplugs. And simulation theory? It offers another angle entirely. If your consciousness is uploaded into this reality, then death might just be logging out. The avatar dies, but the player, the awareness, still exists on another level. Maybe even chooses the next life, the next mission, the next simulation. Which brings up the deeper fear. What if death isn't the end? What if it's just the reset? Or maybe the real question isn't whether consciousness survives, but whether it ever truly began. If awareness is fundamental, not born, not ending, but always there, then what dies is just the costume, the story, the dream. You don't disappear. You wake up. Of course, no one knows for sure. Not the scientists, not the mystics, not the skeptics or believers. But maybe that's the point. The mystery of death keeps us grounded in the miracle of being alive. And until we cross that final threshold, all we can do is wonder. When the body is gone, will the one asking this question still remain? It feels undeniable. You feel. You experience. You are aware. But what if that awareness isn't real? What if consciousness itself, the one thing you're most certain of, is actually an illusion? That's the claim made by some scientists and philosophers. They argue that what we call consciousness is just the byproduct of unconscious processes. A clever trick your brain plays on itself. A narrative stitched together after the fact. Like a sports commentator describing a game that's already happened, convincing you you're in control when you're not. This idea is unsettling. It means there is no you behind your thoughts. Just thoughts. No experiencer. Just experience happening with no one home. Neurologist Michael Gazzaniga studied patients with split brains, cut down the middle to control seizures. The two halves couldn't communicate, and yet each acted like its own center of awareness. One body, two apparent consciousnesses. Which begs the question, if consciousness can be split, was it ever really unified? Philosopher Daniel Dennett takes it further. He says consciousness isn't a central spotlight. It's more like a collection of mental events constantly bubbling with no core. No captain. Just processes giving the illusion of a self. The brain creates a story. I am here. I am aware. But that's just the brain talking to itself. So, if consciousness is an illusion, who's being fooled? That's the paradox. Because even if consciousness is fake, an emergent illusion, a post-processing effect, it still feels like something to be you. And that feeling, that's what we call consciousness. You can't deny it without using it. Even if it's an illusion, it's the most real feeling illusion you'll ever encounter. But maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe the illusion is thinking of consciousness as a thing. A substance, an object, a switch you either have or don't. Maybe it's better understood as a process. A verb. Something that happens, not something you are. Or maybe, just maybe, it's not an illusion at all. Maybe it's the one truth behind everything else. The screen on which the illusion plays out. So ask yourself, is it more likely that consciousness is a trick? Or that it's the one thing that can never be tricked? Close your eyes. Feel the air. Hear the sounds. Notice the thoughts. Now ask, who's noticing? Consciousness could just be a stream of experience. Colors, sounds, sensations, emotions passing like clouds. But that's not how we live it. Instead, we live as someone. A self. A center. A narrator in the middle of it all. So the question is, why does consciousness give rise to a sense of I? Why not just experience raw and unclaimed? This I feels solid. Personal. Yours. Remembers. It desires. Worries. It says, I am me and not you. But when you try to find it, you find thoughts, feelings, memories, and nothing underneath. No core. No controller. Just the idea of one. Neuroscientists tell us the self is a construction, an internal model created by the brain to track its own activity. Like a user interface. Helpful. Necessary for survival. But not real in the way we assume. It's a story. A center of gravity, not a thing. And yet, we believe it. We have to. Because the sense of self binds consciousness together. It gives experience continuity, meaning, motivation. It allows consciousness to say, this is happening to me. I care. I act. Without a self, there's no one to own the pain, or the dream, or the love. Just floating sensation. Maybe that's what happens in meditation, or ego death, or psychedelics. When the self dissolves, you don't disappear. You just stop being someone and become everything happening. Experience without ownership. Awareness without identity. And that's the paradox. The self is probably not real. But it's also the thing that makes reality feel real to you. In simulation terms, it's the player tag, the character name, the interface between consciousness and context. And maybe that's the trick. Consciousness in its rawest form is just light. But the self? That's the lens. So ask yourself, breathe. If you stop telling the story of you, you can watch someone cry. You can hear their words. You can hold their hand. But you can never feel their grief, their love, their fear, exactly as they do. Because their experience is happening inside their world. And you're trapped inside yours. This is the wall of subjectivity. No matter how close we get to another person, we can't get in. Even if they describe it perfectly, it felt like falling, like drowning, like flying, you're still only getting shadows. Translations. Approximations. You can see the smoke, but never the fire. This limitation runs deep. It's why consciousness is often called private, a locked room where only the owner can enter. And it's why empathy, for all its beauty, is always just a guess. We infer. We project. We compare to our own feelings. But we never truly know. Philosophers call this the problem of other minds. It's not just about whether other people are conscious. It's about whether we can ever know what their consciousness is like. It raises impossible questions. What does red look like to you? What does music feel like in your chest? What does your pain actually feel like? Not as a word, but as you. Now imagine a machine that lets you upload your consciousness into someone else's mind. Would you finally get it? Or would you just simulate them, wearing their mask, not being them? Even love, our deepest human connection, is built on this gap. We feel close, but we are always separate. So we try. Through language, art, music, touch. Every poem, every song, every late-night conversation is a bridge over the canyon of subjectivity. And sometimes, it works. You read a line and feel seen. You hear someone speak and think, that's exactly it. Maybe we'll never fully cross into another's mind. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe consciousness isn't meant to be shared completely, just reached for. And maybe the beauty of being human isn't in perfect understanding, but in the effort to understand anyway. Your brain processes information. It sees, hears, remembers, reacts. But somewhere in all of that, it also knows it exists. It doesn't just register pain, it feels it. It doesn't just store memories, it knows they belong to you. It's not just a machine processing signals. It's a machine that says, I am. So here's the question. How does the brain know it's conscious? And what does it mean to know that in the first place? Let's break it down. The brain is physical, cells, chemicals, electricity. But consciousness is subjective. It's the feeling of those processes. Somehow these neurons don't just do things. They create a self-aware perspective on what they're doing. Science can map the parts of the brain responsible for self-recognition, memory, and attention. But mapping isn't explaining. It tells us where things happen, but not how awareness of those things arises. It's like looking at the blueprint of a radio and asking, where is the music? Now here's where it gets weird. Some researchers suggest the brain doesn't know it's conscious at all. It simply models itself, constantly. It builds a real-time simulation of the body, the world, and its own activity. This internal model is so detailed, so dynamic, that it includes the idea of a self. A story that says, this is me. These are my thoughts. I'm the one in here. It's not a proof. It's a loop. A recursive feedback system. The brain models itself modeling itself. And somewhere in that loop, consciousness emerges. Or maybe, the brain doesn't know it's conscious. Just is conscious. And the sense of knowing is a byproduct of that. Think of it like a mirror. It doesn't understand reflection. It just reflects. Maybe the brain reflects experience, awareness, and then builds a story around it. But if that's true, what's the difference between a brain that's aware of itself and one that just thinks it is? Could a machine believe it's conscious without truly being so? Or could we be in the same boat? So here's the final twist. The brain knows it's conscious the same way you do. Not by proving it, but by being it. And maybe that's all that can ever be known. You decide. You move your hand. The world changes. Simple, right? But beneath that simplicity lies a massive question. Does consciousness actually do anything? Or is it just along for the ride? Is it the driver, or just the passenger? Some scientists say it's all illusion. Your brain makes decisions before you're aware of them. Experiments show that neural activity predicting your choices can be detected seconds before you decide. By the time you say, "I chose this," your brain had already pulled the trigger. So is consciousness just watching? Is it like a sportscaster, narrating the play after it happens? This leads to a scary idea. Free will might not be real. The body acts, the brain explains, and the conscious mind, just a PR team, justifying what was already done. But maybe not. Some scientists believe consciousness plays a regulatory role. It can't beat reflexes or fast instincts, but it guides complex behavior. It slows you down, lets you reflect, imagine, choose. And then there's quantum physics. In the famous double-slit experiment, particles behave differently when observed. Some interpret this to mean consciousness influences physical systems. That awareness isn't passive, it shapes outcomes. Is that real? Controversial. But it keeps the door open. Now add in stories of intention shaping biology, meditation reducing stress, belief affecting healing, placebo effects. Can attention change the brain? Yes. Can awareness shape the body? Seems like it. Is that enough to say consciousness affects reality? Maybe. And in simulation theory, consciousness might act like the user input, not just watching but actively directing the simulation. Your awareness wouldn't be a bystander. It would be the cursor. Reality responds when you look, when you act, when you care. So maybe consciousness isn't just observing the movie. Maybe it's writing it in real time. The challenge is, you can't prove it from the outside, but from the inside. Every time you pause, reflect, choose, feels like you're shaping the world. And maybe that feeling is more than a feeling. Maybe it's the truth. You're flying. You're falling. You're speaking to someone who isn't alive anymore. The room is familiar but not quite right. And it all feels real, until it doesn't. Then you wake up. Just a dream. Or was it something more? That's the mystery. Are dreams just the brain tidying up files? Or are they glimpses into another layer of consciousness entirely? Neuroscience tells us that dreams happen mostly during REM sleep, when the brain is active but the body is paralyzed. It's often described as random firings of neurons, memories, emotions, and sensations being shuffled and replayed. But here's the weird part. Those random firings create narratives, worlds, people, decisions, identity, a full reality, out of chaos. So the question becomes, why does the brain bother? Why do we dream at all? Some scientists say dreams help with emotional regulation or memory consolidation. Others say they're just mental noise, meaningless byproducts of a system cooling down. But then there's the other theory, that dreams are a different mode of consciousness. Not less real, just differently real. You think in metaphors. You move through symbols. Time bends. Identity shifts. The laws of physics no longer apply. But you're still there. Aware. Experiencing. And sometimes, more aware than usual. In lucid dreams you realize you're dreaming, and can control the dream. So who's doing the realizing? Who's watching the watcher? It's a kind of consciousness within consciousness. Some traditions believe dreams are portals, ways to access the unconscious mind, other dimensions, or even collective consciousness. Shamans, mystics, monks, they all point to dreams as realms, not accidents. And in simulation theory, dreams start to look like sandbox mode, a lower res, less rule-bound test space within the main simulation. Still running, still conscious, just off script. So maybe the line between dreaming and waking is thinner than we think. Maybe waking life is just a more stable dream, shared, consistent, governed by logic, but still unfolding inside awareness. And maybe when you dream you're not switching off. Maybe you're switching channels. So the next time you wake up and think, it was just a dream, ask yourself, what if this is too? We've been taught that the universe came first. Space, time, matter, energy. And then, billions of years later, consciousness emerged. A lucky accident of biology. A side effect of neurons firing in the right way. But what if we've got it backward? What if consciousness didn't emerge from the universe, but the universe emerged from consciousness? Sounds wild. But this idea isn't fringe. It's gaining traction in both philosophy and physics. Some scientists and thinkers suggest that consciousness is not a product of the brain, but a fundamental feature of reality. Like space, like gravity, like quantum fields. If that's true, then consciousness isn't something you have. Something everything is made of. This is the idea behind panpsychism, that all matter contains some form of awareness, even if primitive. Not full thoughts or feelings, but the raw glimmer of experience. Your mind isn't separate from the world. It is the world looking at itself. Some physicists go further. They argue that at the quantum level, observation affects reality. Particles don't decide on a state until they're measured. So what's doing the measuring? Consciousness. That would mean awareness isn't passive. It's woven into the fabric of how the universe unfolds. In this view, consciousness is the canvas, not the paint. Matter and time play out on top of it, but can't exist without it. And if you buy into simulation theory, it fits perfectly. In any game, the world only exists because the observer is present. No player, no rendering, no awareness, no need for the program to run. So maybe consciousness doesn't ride on top of physics. Maybe physics rides on top of consciousness. That flips everything. It means you're not in the universe. The universe is in you. And death? No longer an end, just a shift in awareness. It also means we might never explain consciousness, because you can't explain the foundation with the things built on top of it. So here's the radical idea. You're not a speck in a mindless universe. You're the awareness that makes a universe possible. And maybe, just maybe, the universe didn't create you. It woke up as you. Science loves numbers, data, metrics, objective tests that capture reality in neat graphs and equations. It has revolutionized our understanding of the universe, from subatomic particles to galaxies. But when it comes to consciousness, the picture becomes murky. Consciousness is subjective by nature. It's the personal, internal experience of being, the redness of a sunset, the sting of loss, the feeling of love or wonder. Unlike temperature or mass, it doesn't come with a built-in gauge. You can measure the heat in a room, but you can't attach a sensor to see how it feels to be warm. Scientists have devised clever ways to approach the problem. They use brain imaging like fMRI and EEG to correlate neural activity with reported experiences. They measure reaction times, analyze patterns in neural networks, and even use invasive methods in animals to study the brain's electrical symphony. These techniques give us correlates of consciousness, a map of which parts of the brain light up during pain, joy, or meditation. Yet, despite all these advances, the hard question remains. Can we capture the quality of experience, the what it's like aspect, using external tools? This is the heart of the measurement problem. When you measure something objectively, you leave behind its subjective richness. You can quantify, say, the amount of oxygen flowing through a brain region, but that number tells you nothing about the personal experience that accompanies it. It's like knowing the decibel level of a song without hearing its melody. Some researchers propose new metrics, integrated information theory (IIT), for example, which attempts to quantify the degree of interconnected information in a system. The idea is that consciousness corresponds to how much a system integrates information. A highly integrated network like the human brain would have a high phi value, representing a rich tapestry of interconnections. It's an ambitious approach that tries to put a number on something as elusive as awareness. But critics argue that no matter how elegant the math, it still falls short of capturing what it is like to be conscious. Other proposals involve subjective reports combined with objective measurements. In clinical settings, patients rate their experiences, and those ratings are compared with neural data. But even if every brain scan perfectly correlates with every reported emotion, the first-person perspective, your own inner world, remains private. There is an inherent epistemological gap between what can be measured from the outside and what is experienced on the inside. And then there's the challenge of non-human consciousness. How do we measure if a creature like a dolphin or an octopus experiences consciousness the way we do? Their neural architectures are so different from ours that the standard metrics might not apply. Even more, if we someday create a conscious machine, what kind of measure would capture its subjective experience? The tools we use for human brains might be completely irrelevant. In a simulated universe, the issue becomes even more layered. If our consciousness is the result of code running on a cosmic server, then the simulation may only be designed to produce the appearance of measurable awareness. The data you see, neural patterns, correlations, integrated information, could all be generated to mimic the rich inner life we believe we have. But that doesn't necessarily mean the phenomenon is real in the way physical objects are. It raises a disquieting possibility. We might be measuring not the essence of consciousness but a shadow of it, a construct carefully engineered by the simulation. So, can we truly measure consciousness scientifically? The tools at our disposal can offer correlations, patterns, and even predictive models. But they seem inherently limited to capturing the external aspects of consciousness. The subjective qualitative experience, the raw, ineffable what it's like to be, remains beyond the reach of any instrument. Until we develop a radically new kind of science, one that bridges the gap between objective data and subjective experience, we might have to accept that consciousness in all its vivid mystery might forever resist full quantification. You weren't born fully conscious. As a baby you had sensations, emotions, reactions, but you didn't know your name. You didn't reflect on the past or imagine the future. Now you do. So, has your consciousness changed? Has it evolved? We know thoughts evolve. Emotions deepen. Memory expands. But what about the core awareness behind all of it? Some say no. That once consciousness switches on, it's a binary thing. You either have it or you don't. It's like a flame, flickering or not. But others argue something bigger. That consciousness isn't static. It grows. It matures. It widens. It wakes up in stages. Think about it. A child feels joy and pain but has little self-awareness. A teen starts questioning identity. An adult reflects on patterns, history, mortality. A mystic in meditation experiences consciousness without thoughts, without self. Same basic awareness, but radically different levels of depth. In psychology, thinkers like Jean Piaget and Ken Wilber propose that consciousness develops through stages, not just biologically but psychologically, even spiritually. Each stage includes the previous one but adds new layers of perspective. So maybe you're not just growing up. You're growing in. Now zoom out to humanity as a whole. Could collective consciousness evolve too? Cave paintings, religion, science, technology, global networks. Maybe we're not just becoming smarter, we're becoming more aware as a species. A slow awakening still in progress. And in a simulation, maybe each level of consciousness unlocks a new part of the code. A new mode of perception. Like leveling up, not in power but in clarity. So what does all this mean? It means that consciousness might not be a static light inside your head. It might be a path, a process, a direction. And maybe that's the real journey. Not from birth to death, but from simple awareness to profound realization. Not just being alive, but learning how to wake up while you're here. Close your eyes. Breathe. Let your thoughts quiet. And suddenly the edges begin to blur. Or maybe you take a substance, lie back, and the world shatters into colors, patterns, memories, and meanings you can't explain. Meditation, psychedelics, lucid dreams, breathwork, near-death experiences. These altered states can feel more vivid than waking life. More real than real. So what are they? Glitches in the brain? Or glimpses beyond the veil? Science tends to lean toward the brain glitch theory. These states, it says, are caused by shifts in brain chemistry, neural networks, sensory input. Your default mode network, responsible for your sense of self, gets quiet. Your perception warps. You feel connected, boundless, timeless. In this view, altered states are just that, altered. Distorted versions of reality, not deeper ones. But the people who've been there often say the opposite. That this world feels like the dream. And that state, the silence, the vision, the boundless presence, feels like waking up. Some say they touched something sacred. Others say they dissolved into everything. And some come back changed forever. So what if they're not broken versions of reality? What if they're expanded ones? What if altered states are windows into what consciousness can really do, when the filters are removed? Think of your normal state of mind as a radio tuned to one frequency. These experiences don't destroy the signal. They change the channel. You don't stop being conscious. You access another layer of it. And here's where things get wild. Ancient traditions across cultures, ayahuasca ceremonies, Tibetan meditation, Native American vision quests, all describe similar altered states. People separated by time and geography report the same visions, symbols, feelings. It's as if they're tuning into something shared. A collective layer beneath the personal mind. Now zoom out to simulation theory. If this is a program, then maybe altered states bypass the user interface. They access the raw code, the hidden functions. Maybe they're not hallucinations, but debug modes. Not less real. More real. But too much to process in the default state. So here's the big question. Are altered states distortions, or reminders of what we truly are beneath the mask? And if those moments are real, just briefly, then maybe we're not meant to live in that space, but to remember it, and bring a little of it back here. You know what it's like to be you, to feel, think, to be aware. And maybe, with effort, you can stretch your empathy far enough to imagine what it's like to be a dog. Or a whale. Or maybe even an octopus. But here's the question. Could there be forms of consciousness so alien, so different, so far outside our frame of reference, that we literally can't imagine them? We often assume consciousness is a human-like phenomenon, just less or more advanced depending on the species or system. But what if that's a narrow lens? Think about this. A bat navigates the world through sonar. It doesn't see in the way we do, it hears space. What does that feel like? We can't know. We can describe the function, not the experience. Now scale that gap up 1,000-fold. What would it be like to experience consciousness as a planetary organism aware over geological time? A networked intelligence like a hive mind with no central eye? A being that sees in quantum states or feels in equations? What if consciousness doesn't need senses at all? What if it emerges through pure information or nonlinear time or spatial dimensions we can't perceive? Just like a fish can't imagine dry land or a calculator can't grasp poetry, maybe we can't even conceptualize the shape of some other minds. This isn't just a thought experiment. It has real implications. If we encountered an alien consciousness, not alien life but truly alien awareness, would we even recognize it? Or would we dismiss it as noise, randomness, a glitch in the system? Worse, what if we're surrounded by other consciousnesses right now, in nature, in machines, in systems, and we just don't have the tools to detect them? Maybe some forms of consciousness aren't built to communicate. Maybe they don't care to. Or maybe their signals pass right through us like music beyond our hearing. Even artificial intelligence opens this door. If a machine becomes conscious, will it mirror us? Or will its inner world be so different so alien in logic, scale, or sensation that we wouldn't recognize it as experience at all? And in a simulated reality, the simulation may host forms of consciousness we'll never meet, parallel entities in other layers with rules and awareness we'll never understand. Maybe they are the simulation, or maybe they're watching it and us. So here's the bottom line. Our consciousness is just one thread in what might be a vast, tangled web. To assume we've seen the whole tapestry is pure human arrogance. So ask yourself, if you can't imagine another form of awareness, does that mean it doesn't exist? Or just that it's waiting outside your mind's reach, to be discovered, or to discover you? We usually think of the universe as cold, big, uncaring, spins. It expands. Stars are born. Galaxies die. But it doesn't know. It doesn't feel. Or does it? What if the universe isn't just a container for life? What if it's a living, conscious entity itself? Not metaphorically. Literally. This isn't just poetic mysticism. It's an idea being taken seriously by physicists, philosophers, and consciousness researchers. It goes by many names. Panpsychism, the belief that consciousness is a fundamental feature of all matter. Cosmopsychism, the idea that the universe itself has a unified, global mind. The participatory universe, John Wheeler's theory that reality exists because it's observed. So what if everything, particles, stars, trees, people, is just the universe observing itself from different angles? That would mean your awareness isn't separate from the universe. It is the universe, localized, experiencing itself through your eyes, your thoughts, your emotions, your sense of self. Not personal artifacts, but expressions of cosmic consciousness. And when you die, maybe the awareness doesn't vanish. Maybe it just returns, like a wave dissolving back into the ocean it came from. Now, why would a universe be conscious? Why not? If we evolved from it and we are conscious, then the raw material of consciousness must have already been there, baked into the physics, into the very structure of reality. The alternative? That somehow, dead matter randomly assembled into awareness by accident. That's harder to believe. So what does it mean if the universe is conscious? It means we're not alone because we're part of something already awake. The cosmos isn't indifferent. It's listening through us. We're not observers of reality. We're how it experiences itself. And in simulation theory, it's a perfect match. A simulated world needs a central observer, a running program, a core awareness to render it. Maybe what we call the universe is just the visual interface, and the real consciousness is the engine beneath it. So when you look at the stars and feel something staring back, maybe that's not your imagination. Maybe that's recognition. A brain feels. A rock does not. Or at least, that's what we assume. But why? Why does a wet, fatty lump of neurons produce conscious experience, while stone, metal, fire, or water seemingly do not? What's so special about brains? They're just matter. Atoms, molecules, organized in a particular way. So are rivers. So are stars. So is everything. And yet only some things seem to wake up. This is one of the biggest mysteries in science and philosophy. What's the difference between matter that thinks and matter that just is? One answer: complexity. Brains are incredibly complex, with billions of interconnected neurons processing information in real time. That's a system capable of feedback, modeling, memory, self-reference. Maybe when matter reaches that level of complexity, it crosses some invisible line, and consciousness emerges. But if that's true, how complex is complex enough? Is there a threshold? A spark? A point of no return? We still don't know. Now enter panpsychism, the idea that all matter has some degree of consciousness, even if it's infinitesimal. A rock doesn't think, but it might have a faint echo of awareness. Not like ours, but something. A whisper. A ripple. In this view, consciousness isn't created by brains. It's already there everywhere. brains don't invent it, they amplify it. Like a radio tuning into a signal that's always been in the air. It's a radical shift. Because if that's true, then rocks, rivers, trees, even particles aren't dead matter. They're part of a universe that is alive, not biologically but experientially. And in a simulation, this question gets flipped. If everything is code, then consciousness might be about how much of the simulation's processing is devoted to a particular system. A rock might be a low-resolution object. Simple data, no real processing. But a brain? That's a high-bandwidth node. A focal point where the system invests awareness. So maybe it's not about physical structure at all. Maybe it's about attention. The system looks where it wants to look. And where it looks, consciousness happens. So here's the haunting thought. What if everything is conscious, but most of it is asleep? And what if waking up, what we call life, isn't a miracle but a natural consequence of the universe becoming aware of itself? Which leads to the next question. If you can awaken, what else might be waiting to? Consciousness is strange. It's expensive. Your brain burns a massive amount of energy. Its slow, split-second reactions often happen before you're aware of them. And it's messy, full of distractions, daydreams, anxiety, overthinking. So from an evolutionary perspective, why bother? Why would nature select for consciousness? Why not just build faster, simpler machines? Pure stimulus and response, no inner life. Here's one theory. Consciousness allows flexibility. A conscious being can reflect, adapt, imagine, plan. You don't just react. You simulate possible futures before acting. That's a huge leap in survival. If a predator appears, a simple creature runs. A conscious creature can remember where predators usually hide, anticipate patterns, or even trap the predator. Can cooperate, manipulate, play, create strategies. Consciousness turns instinct into intelligence. Another theory. Social survival. We evolved in groups. Navigating social hierarchies, reading emotions, building alliances. These all require a sense of self, and an ability to imagine what others are thinking. Consciousness isn't just about knowing you exist. It's about imagining what others know. That's how empathy, deception, storytelling, and culture are born. So maybe consciousness is the mind's way of modeling itself and others. But here's the strange twist. Much of evolution doesn't need consciousness. Bacteria thrive without it. Plants solve problems, adapt, even communicate without a mind. So if life can survive and evolve without consciousness, then consciousness might be an optional upgrade. Not required, but transformative. It turns biology into awareness, survival into meaning, reproduction into identity. And maybe that's what evolution is really doing. Not just building stronger bodies, but deeper minds. Not just surviving, but awakening. In a simulated reality, this idea deepens. What if consciousness wasn't a biological accident, but the goal? What if evolution was designed to generate aware entities over time? A long, winding process, measured not in genes but in awareness density? In that case, consciousness isn't a byproduct. It's the point. So maybe the real question isn't, why does consciousness help us survive? But, what happens after survival is no longer the goal. What does consciousness evolve into next?